I'm Jonathan Pollack, and I'm a senior fellow in the Foreign Policy Program. North Korea does not pose, at this point, a direct threat to the United States. It does, however, pose a threat to those Americans, including military personnel, business people, students, visitors who are in South Korea. The real threat that North Korea poses at present is a regional threat, or maybe you could say a peninsular threat. Either way, the fact that in one very concentrated bit of geography, it is one of the most heavily armed locations on Earth. The usual response, of course, has been a military response, in the sense that you prepare for war, you seek to do whatever you can to deter renewed military conflict, and if it should fail, to be able to defend against the results of that attack. And it's not a perfect solution by any means. It obviously requires the sustainment of very high levels of military capability and involvement. But I would note that it has more or less worked. It's less than satisfactory. It puts the region under a situation of, if you will, open-ended tension and uncertainty. And more to the point, this is in one of the most critical locations for the global economy. Korea, South Korea, now the 11th or 12th biggest economy in the world, critical to global supply chains. Japan, obviously, the third biggest economy in the world, and China, the second biggest economy in the world. All very concentrated in this one very small piece of territory. And we need to remind ourselves of that, because very, very often the conflicts the United States finds itself involved in are in locations that are relatively remote. This is not. Some people, for example, have noted that President Trump seemed emboldened because he dropped cruise missiles on Syria and an enormous bomb was dropped on Afghanistan. But Korea is not Syria, and Korea is not Afghanistan. The consequences of a war here would be devastating and potentially global in their reach. What drives policy now is a belief, it's not yet materialized quite this way, but a fear that North Korea's ultimate intention is to develop and operationalize a long-range nuclear-armed ballistic missile that would be able to reach American territory. And what President Trump has said, and many others have said, is this is fundamentally unacceptable to the United States. So if he means what he says, he's not ruling out the most extreme of actions at some future point directed against North Korea. North Korea is the only state in the world to have tested nuclear weapons in the 21st century. They've done this 5 times. In the last 16 months alone, they've conducted approximately 30 ballistic missile tests of different shapes and sizes. So they're clearly pressing ahead in ways that creates enormous danger. What Trump is arguing is that a kind of what I'll call a high-low mix here is what is really required. That is, at the high end, the U.S. would put increased military pressure against North Korea to inhibit its actions, but at the same time, China would significantly increase its economic pressure because China's role in the North Korean economy is critical. China would be key here, and Trump is trying to argue that if China will step up to the plate, the combination of the military pressure and the economic pressure will ultimately constrict what North Korea is able to do. My biggest concern is not war by design, war initiated in a conscious way, either by North Korea or by the United States. If, for example, we saw the fueling of a long-range missile, it would be more how the talk and the preparations of all the key actors here result in an inadvertent conflict. There are a lot of countries right now that are talking about preemption. Preemption is a very, very dangerous word in a military context. Kim, on that basis, might decide he has nothing to lose independent of the consequences. He might feel that others are going to act first if he doesn't act first. Over the longer run, I think that the bigger threat to North Korea is not American missiles. It's ideas, it's information, it's access to the outside world that would put at risk the ability of a family-run dynasty to maintain its totalitarian rule over this one small but very dangerous state.